18 of the most beautiful public spaces in the world, according to urban designers. Cars clogged the streets of Bournemouth, England, an outlying suburb of London, for decades. But in the mid-1990s, the town added new pedestrian-only areas to its center. The change transformed the town, according to Esther Kurland, the director of Urban Design London, a non-profit that connects urban designers and planners in the city. This was one of the first traffic-calming shared space schemes in the country, Kurland tells Business Insider. And I was fascinated in how the behavior of both drivers and pedestrians changed. Bournemouth is just one example of the way innovative public space can improve the lives of an area's inhabitants. To find more, WE reached out to urban designers and planners around the world. They told us about spaces that have been game changers for cities, that inspired them to go into the field, and that they simply find stunning. Here are 18 of the world's most beautiful parks, libraries, streets, in plazas, according to people who design them for a living. The Live Up Friends Meeting House in Houston, Texas. Completed in 2000, the Live Up Friends Meeting House is a Quaker gathering place that's open to the public. Architect James Turrell incorporated tungsten bulbs on the walls with light that syncs up with the sunrise and sunset. One of the spatial experiences that has most moved me was sitting in the Live Oak Friends Meeting House to watch a sunset, says Quillian Riano, an architect and urban planner based in New York City. In a period of 2 hours, and with no tricks, people inside the religious structure see the space around them change as the natural light outside changes. Place Jacques Cartier in Montreal, Canada. Located next to the Old Port of Montreal, Place Jacques Cartier is a public square that hosts street artists and kiosks. It is a car-free zone in the summer. The first public place I ever fell in love with as a kid was Place Jacques Cartier. Brent Toderian, founder of the Vancouver-based urban planning consultancy Toderian Urban Works, says. Not just the plaza itself, but the surrounding community of beautiful character-filled pedestrian streets feeding into and out of the central space. As a kid, it was a special and magical place. As an urbanist, it still is. River Street in Savannah, Georgia. Savannah's historic River Street formed around 200 years ago, and still features its original cobblestones. Once lined with warehouses, the waterfront street was redeveloped in the late 1970s to include shops, restaurants, bars, and art galleries. I've always loved the working port, with the massive scale of the ships, the various industrial forms, and the intersection of the land and water in piers, bulkheads, and wharves, says Catherine J. Madden, principal at Madden Planning Group. Los Bosques de Palermo in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Los Bosques de Palermo has many different areas and attractions for Buenos Aires residents, including sports fields, groves, lakes, a zoo, and rose gardens. Ignacio Siskini, VP of Design for the Bryant Park Corporation and 34th Street Partnership, grew up in the Palermo neighborhood, and says he used the park all the time. The large soccer fields across my house where we went every day and the town square in front of the church where we met up with friends in the evening were part of my daily life, he says. Trafalgar Square, London, England. Since the 13th century, London's Trafalgar Square has been used for gatherings and political demonstrations, including Bloody Sunday, the first Aldermaston March, anti-war protests, and campaigns against climate change. Over time, the city has made tweaks to the square's design, making it more pedestrian-friendly, Kurland says. Trafalgar Square was a very influential scheme for me, seeing what could actually be done, changed, with simple things like new steps. And removing a small element of traffic space, she says. The argument over whether it would cause gridlock in central London or not was very interesting, and opened up a whole new set of questions for me. The streets of Bournemouth, England. After the town of Bournemouth, England banned cars from certain streets in its centre, it felt like a different place, Kurland says. It is not a particularly aesthetically beautiful place, but I saw how it transformed from a traffic-dominated road, stopping the town from having a functioning center, to a calmed, more pedestrian-friendly, smooth-flowing, busy but not interesting high street, she says. Point State Park promenades in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh's waterfront promenades were once the site of factories, made a park in the 60s, Craig Tushek explains. The area was renovated in 2011, and is now home to Pittsburgh's iconic fountain and lovely riverfront promenades, as well as a smooth pathway with beautiful views for cyclists and walkers. The Red Rocks Amphitheater in Denver, Colorado. This 9,525-seat outdoor amphitheater is set in an astounding red sandstone formation that feels large and intimate, contemporary and historic, epic and humane, and reminds us that our most exuberant gestures are so much smaller than nature's, Rose says. The Ryoan-ji Zen Gardens in Kyoto, Japan. The Zen Gardens feature patterns that are timeless, yet always changing, filled with stillness and life that call us to pay attention, says Jonathan Rose, the president of Jonathan Rose Companies, a real estate development, planning, and investment firm. The main atrium of the Solomon or Guggenheim Museum in New York City. Though visiting the Guggenheim's atrium is free to the public, you need to purchase admission to see the rest of the museum. As a public space, the grand rounded main atrium gallery of the Guggenheim Museum is a wonderful and inspiring lesson in organic architecture, says William J. Morton, the founder of WJM Architects. The entrance is deliberately very low as you pass through from exterior to interior. It is a poetic expression enhancing the art it displays. Streetseelmarkt in Dresden, Germany. Streetseelmarkt is the oldest Christmas market in Germany. Booths fill the square, but also run for miles north from the Hauptbahnhof through the Streetseelmarkt, across the river, to Albertlitz, says Craig Tushak, a designer at the National Association of City Transportation Officials in New York City. He adds that the market serves as a shared space, where people can congregate and hang out. La Trobe Reading Room at the State Library in Melbourne, Australia. The Reading Room Dome was the largest of its type in the world on completion in 1854, Bowerman says. It is a place that citizens can always rely on for peace, quiet, solitude, and reflection. The octagonal space was designed to hold over 1 million books and up to 600 people, making it a welcoming space for visitors. Hosier Lane in Melbourne, Australia. Hosier Lane is a graffiti laneway in Melbourne's city centre that effectively brought about the gentrification of street art and legitimized its validity in the city's modern culture, says Dale Bowerman, who worked as an urban planner for the city of Melbourne. Once upon a time, it was home to a Banksy artwork, which was accidentally painted over by council workers. Prospect Park in Brooklyn, New York. It is so many things to so many people and really serves all of the communities around it. Julie Ember, Associate Director of Design at New York's Bryant Park Corporation and 34th Street Partnership, says of Brooklyn's largest park. It is simultaneously a beautiful escape into nature while being fully representative of the city and the human touch. It is a great balance of open-ended space and programmed space. And maybe most importantly, its landscape is really varied and interesting and never fails to surprise me. The streets of New Orleans, Louisiana. New Orleans street design is exceptional because they're incredibly walkable, says Eric Kronberg, the principal of design and architecture firm Kronberg Wall. I had the really good luck to choose Tulane School of Architecture in New Orleans for college, Kronberg explains. I've spent the last 20 years since graduation returning to the city. I measure, photograph, and observe all the little things that contribute to the city on each visit. These typically unnoticed things like street width, block length, sidewalk conditions, relationship of buildings to the street, all represent dense, walkable urbanism at a human scale. The Central Square in Seaside, Florida. Building a new residential housing development that actually feels like a small town is almost impossible, says Steve Mazzon, the founder of Mazzon Design. But the founder and developer of Seaside, Florida did just that, using public space to foster a new independent, tight-knit community. The developer had the audacity to build a town square, with a post office, a grocery, a bookstore, and a collection of other restaurants and shops with apartments above, Mazzon explains. Never mind that the post office wasn't a sanctioned U.S. post office, but rather ganged mailboxes installed inside a tiny civic building. Because the mailboxes wore civic clothing, people behaved in a civic way. And even though Seaside has never been incorporated as a town, people nonetheless behave in neighborly ways. Spruce Street Harbor Park in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Bordering an urban beach, Spruce Street Harbor Park features colorful lights at night and hammocks for lounging. It was intended to be a temporary intervention, really a desperate move for a very tough location separated from Philadelphia's old city by a wide and busy road, Coletta explains. But it keeps going and going because people keep coming and coming. It is a simple, loving intervention whose design elements have been widely copied. Millennium Park in Chicago, Illinois. It was clearly a game changer, not only for Chicago and the real estate that surrounds the park, but for its influence on cities everywhere, says Carol Coletta, the VP of Community and National Initiatives for the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation. Coletta manages millions of dollars annually in grants for city design, and says Millennium Park is the ideal public space. Intended to celebrate the second millennium, the 25-acre park hosts public art and events. Lori Garden, tucked in the park's southeast corner, is one of my favorite places in the world that somehow manages to remain deeply calming in the midst of the chaos of the larger park, she says.